Telling you, man, we talk about this all the time. It's got to be story first conversation because we get we get the opportunity to kind of go back in time and revisit a project that we did many years ago. We had the opportunity to work with Teach for America in Jacksonville, in Florida, and I got to work with lovely lady Allyson Reese, who brought me into this fold of a project for Teach for America. They're doing big things back then, and creating some promotional content for that entity. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to highlight the process. Of course, a lot of the times in production, the production part of it is essential, but there's so much that goes on well before that. And I'm sure a lot of you guys already know, but I want to take it one step further and give you like, here's a literal play by play, a literal like recap on what happened both before the production, during the production, and a little bit after. So I'm excited for the conversation today. We have Allyson Reese here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate it, even though the project was like so many years ago.
It doesn't
COVID.
matter. It's always lovely to chat with you. I'm happy to be joining you all the way from Jacksonville, Florida.
Definitely. Thank you. Awesome. So, to recap, let's set a little bit of the foundation for the project. So initially, we met through a wedding. Allison had uh, was working the event planning and the wedding planning for the wedding, which was a beautiful wedding at a Ribot Club in Jacksonville, I believe.
It was
Yeah,
freezing.
yeah, it was
I
cold.
I
It was a
remember
little
it was
cold.
really cold. Yeah, it was like
Yeah,
Floridians were not ready.
yeah. I look at all my like behind the scenes footage, and I'm like,
You were wearing like a ninja mask. We kept
man,
calling you Ninja.
black jacket, hat, just completely covered in the coal, filming a wedding. Shouts out to Lexi, the bride, because she was in the cold with her dress
Oh
on,
yeah,
filming it, and she was like, "Do you need one more take, or are you good?" She was asking me. I'm like, "No, I'm good, but thank you so much for." Anyway, that's besides the
she was
point. So
lovely.
she was amazing. I personally enjoyed working with you, Allison, and that project turned out great. Till this day, it's still a flagship piece that we use for our marketing and things like that. But we had a great time working there. And was it a little after that? Was it like, I don't remember the exact days, but a couple months
Yeah,
later, something like that? Or was it the following year?
it was
Can't
pretty. It might have been the following year, or it was that spring. I can't remember,
Yeah,
but it was
yeah,
during COVID, so that's why I remember it all being close together. So
exactly. Okay.
those
Yeah,
mystery years in your brain
yeah,
that just
right,
meld together.
right, right. And so she brought me on to the possibility of doing some production work for Teach for America. And I want to turn it over to you, Allison. Kind of bring me up to speed to like how we went from the wedding stuff to like doing this project.
Yeah. So I was really excited to have this conversation today too, because as a former small business owner,
Yeah.
to get the opportunity to do a behind the scenes with a client and what their thought process is on the how it goes down, I'm
Hmm.
hopeful is like very helpful for other videographers, small businesses.
Yeah.
So that's why today was kind of cool. It was also nice to like relive the experience a little bit because
Yeah.
even though we worked together at the wedding, I was there as the event planner, you were there as the videographer, right? So then
Right.
my full time job was working at Teach for America in development. So during that year, I remember, we couldn't do any of the things that we normally do. So we couldn't have fundraising events, we couldn't have board meetings, we couldn't bring board members into classrooms.
Hmm.
And just a little bit of background: Teach for America it is a program where people join in and they become a teacher and they do a 2 year commitment. So a lot of them are people who maybe they're in teaching, maybe they were not. So sometimes when you're explaining what Teach for America is, even to the average person without COVID, it can be a little bit of a let me show you.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to tell you.
Yeah.
So without the ability to bring them into a classroom or without being able to meet students or, learn what the heck Teach for America is, I feel like we were kind of facing this, what do we do? Um, so then I had the idea of like, well, could we sort of time capsule this? because also there's like so many entities about what happened in classrooms during COVID that we might never do that again or see that again or know what that looks like. And I also was
Right.
just, so I feel like it was twofold. Really, it was like, how can we capture this moment in time? How can we explain what Teach for America is? But more importantly, how can I tell a story and bring someone into a classroom where then they can't go?
Yeah.
How can I show what is actually happening?
Right.
Because it's just too hard to just tell.
Right. Right. And so, in going through that process, decided,
I reached out to
uh,
you.
yeah, to reach out to me of all people and try to see what we can do to create this project,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Did you have something else to add there? I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, I was saying I remember when I reached out to you, I think I said probably something similar to what I literally just said.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember the most was you were like, okay. And I think I was like, oh, and like, 3 minutes or under. We were talking about like how many things we wanted to talk about in the film. And you were just like, it's too much stuff, so many things. But I
Yeah,
remember
totally.
you gave me like very specific questions. Like you sat down with me and we took a lot of time on the front end. And I think that that was one of the things that definitely is like a huge part of the process that I just didn't see coming
Yeah.
of how the planning of the preparation for the day we were going to film was going to
Right.
go.
Right.
But
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point because that's I can bring the gear to you and I can say, all right, press record, go, do whatever, go. You're supposed to do it, and it's no like we in with all the things that Teach for America does, take that and that's a lot. Then you add COVID. Okay, now add how TFA works while COVID is going on. Okay, capture that. But people need to understand what TFA is, but they also need to understand how COVID is affecting TFA,
mm-hmm.
and they need to understand why this promotional is being shown. Like there's so many different nuances to try to capitalize on, but at the end of the day, this is a really cool organization that is, I mean, in a very quick way, kind of transforming teachers or people that are coming in to be teachers that may be hesitant or reluctant or not sure how it will work out, and really giving them an opportunity to like soar and like work through it and figure it out and providing the resources behind them. And I think that's kind of the heart of what we were trying to portray on camera, is not just the promotional of what is Teach for America, but how exactly is Teach for America um, uh, preparing and advocating for these incoming teachers, as well as the alumni or veterans. I'm not sure what the word is, but
Mm-hmm. Yep.
those that have already gone through the process. How are they pouring back into people that are coming in for the first time as well? So it was a really cool kind of unfolding of the story, but it took a good bit of folding back some layers and saying, okay, I understand. I get it. I get it. Okay. Okay. Let's go in a little bit more and try to identify like what the actual goal is for this project. And I think if
Yeah.
we have that down, kind of the goal for it, what we want to leave with at the end of the day when we watch the video, what do we want to make sure we leave with, what's communicated, kind of a thing. And I think that's where a lot of the times my brain went when it came to trying to figure that out. Um, and that takes a good bit of thought process. Like I'm sure if I remember correctly, we had a few meetings virtually
Yes.
where we're kind of going through the same thing and trying to figure out, okay, if this is what we're trying to communicate, now that we identify the goal for the video, which is of course showcasing the promotion of TSA, but also showcasing how TFA is preparing and guiding and molding these upcoming teachers. How do we showcase that? Like, what does
Yeah.
that even look like? Teachers are everywhere doing everything for all the students at the same time. Like you said, different classrooms are set up differently. All these different, like, how do we even do that? And so for me, that's from like, all right, Allison,
Yeah. I know.
I need your help because I'm on the outside looking in on this one. I don't really know how that works or what you guys are doing. Like, help me help you.
Yeah. And
Well,
I think like a testament to the success of the project for me.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You're
was
good.
like when you reached out to me and you were like, "Hey, let's. Are you up for having a conversation about this project that we did? I know it was a while ago. It was like." I think you even said to me, you were like, "Oh, do you really remember?" And I was like, "Oh, the video was about resilience."
Yeah.
And I remembered it so immediately. And then when I pulled it back up and looked at it while we were chatting, I think the title, I mean, hold on, I pulled it back up. It's literally 2020, 2021 year of resilience is like
Right.
what it's called. So I was like, oh, success. Like
Yeah.
that was the point of the project, right? So like capturing all of those elements, the theme throughout all of those things, I wrote them down, right? Like what is Teach for America? We really wanted to highlight virtual learning because
Right.
like I had so many board members who were like, I just don't understand. So like there's this one image of, this teacher, she's standing there and she's like showing the screen. So you had the screen and then you had the board behind her and she was using like a whiteboard. So
Right.
because they were just like, what does that mean? So then we did, what is Teach America? What does it look like to be virtual learners? Alumni, because we wanted to talk about what happens after the classroom. Like, do people who do Teach for America stay in the classroom or they don't? And then
Mm.
the last one was this 2030 goal that the organization set,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Zandra reads it at the end. So
Yeah.
all of those elements I put like under the umbrella of they just highlight these back to back to back examples of resilience. Like
Yeah.
I faced this and this is how I felt and this is what we did. I faced this is what happened, this is what we did. So I feel like when I thought about that part, I was like, oh, yeah, we did it. But
Yeah.
and like you said, in the moment when we were in the very beginning, I do remember a part where you were like, okay, so I think you said like who's going to be the main person that's going to be working on the project. And I remember
Yeah.
being like, well, I guess it's me.
Yeah.
But then I was kind of like, what do you mean? Maybe it is somebody else. And then I was like you were starting to like slowly peel back these like, okay, I need your help to tell the story, right? So like I think something that from a client perspective, we reach out to a videographer, we want to do a project, and like you said, you could show up and videotape some stuff and then, put it together. But you went the extra mile to sort of nudge me to say, okay, so, but like, let's prep the story and let's make sure that we're asking the right questions to the people. What people do you want to interview? How many do you want? What schools should we go to? And you were helping me to create the storyline. Whereas I think sometimes people think like, oh, here's this idea, and then you run with it, and you're like, but I know which teachers we were going to go see, right? And I
Mhm.
knew why we should see the certain classrooms that we were going to.
Right.
And I feel like you really pulled me along the journey. Whereas I think when people reach out to businesses to do this, they think I was like, oh, I'm going to tell Damien that we're doing a video and he's got it. Like, and you
Yeah.
do. But, we talked about before we started recording, I
Mhm.
had this giant spreadsheet that I made. I mean, and it changed so many times because it kind of was like, here's everything. And then we had to start eliminating, like, okay, that's not going to make the cut. Like,
Yeah.
okay, why do we need to do this? And
Yeah.
it was very it was just not
Yeah.
it was totally not what I thought, but the
Yeah.
amount of work that was put in ahead of time only amplified the story in the end.
Mm. Yeah. I was gonna say you pretty much you almost ended up doing the job of like a producer of the project kind of thing where you're putting all these things in order. Yeah, and thank you so much for kind of shedding that light. And it's kind of one of the layers to peel back is, man, these projects like this where you're a lot of the projects, but of this design where you're really having to go into the deepness of an organization, or really going into just trying to figure out who's who and why do we need them. Um, you really it really helps to have someone that's in the organization there to help you with the process, because all of our meetings were virtual. So if
Right?
I'm
Because
trying
you're
to
in
do
Georgia. That was the
this,
other
right,
thing.
you're right. That was the other thing. I was in Georgia and you're in Florida, and to be able to, man, have our meetings piece by piece, figuring out what we're trying to do, and then saying, okay, we actually need to figure out who's even going to be speaking on camera, where are these people located, can we even get them in front of the camera. It's like normally that's a boots on the ground kind of a job, but for me, I heavily relied on you to do that, and I tried my best to kind of equip you as much as possible for that. But that's the game. Like, that's important. That right there is the difference between a quality product that actually serves the organization well versus someone showing up and pressing record.
Right.
And I think that's man, that's something that is kind of the difference between a business owner and a video contractor. It's like
Mhm.
there's a full investment into the project to where it's really not a win unless we all win. Like, everybody
Right.
has,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
I thoroughly was appreciate I totally appreciated you for doing that, because you didn't have to. You could have given it to someone else, or you could have said, Damien, you got it, like you said, and just, had me go. But I could not have done that without you. Definitely a dream client. And I think that's man, being able to, you kind of, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay.
I
That's
know.
fine.
Sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. But um you're talking about figuring out, like, some of the questions, and like, what do we need to ask? Why do we need to ask? Who do we need to ask it to? Like, that kind of stuff. Those things don't come um, until you figure out the actual purpose or goal that you're trying to create for the project. So you talked about resiliency. We talked about being able to get very clear in understanding Teach for America, but also how they are operating during this time, and really shedding light on that, so that way it's not just something that's recognized, but it's highlighted, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, they're doing that in the school system. Sorry, Siri. Sorry, Siri. I'm not talking to you. So, they're doing that in the school system. That's crazy. I had no clue. And I just want to take time to make sure I'm saying we didn't figure out what we needed to ask, or the questions we needed to ask, until we figured out the actual purpose and goal we were trying to communicate in
Correct.
the project. And it has to go in that order, because once again, I can show up and I can figure out something to ask Allyson. But hey, Allyson, tell me about Teach for America. What do you like about it? How's it helped you in your life? And you're like, I mean, it's been great, but I thought we were talking about it can go
Right.
so many different ways, but being able to kind of fight past the outline and kind of say, hey, we really want to focus on the things that we want to focus on. That takes some gumption, because you kind of got to go, okay, no, we're not going to focus on that. We want to focus on this. Not going to focus on that. We want to focus on this. And so
Hmm.
that's really key. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, one of my former teachers many moons ago said this, and it's always stuck with me. But, you know, you can take, it'll take you 2 minutes to prepare a 2 hour speech, right? Because you got 2 hours, so you'll just wing it. But it'll take me 2 hours to prepare a 2 minute speech, because I got
Right.
to make the impact in that 2 minutes matter, right? And I
Right.
have to be able to figure out, I got to get very specific. I have to get to the point. I have to hit my mark, and I think that's kind of how it felt, was that I was like, this video can't be too long. We have to like hit the emotion, right? Because for any of you who work in development and fundraising, there's something that we talk about all the time. There's head people and heart people, right? So
Hmm.
the head people, they want the data. What are the reading scores? What's the economic impact of teachers? How many
Mhm.
teachers do you have?
Yeah.
What's the retention rate? What are the some, like, they want that part of it, and that'll be what moves it for them. And
Yeah.
then there's the people who, like I said, they got to see it. They have to see the impact. They have to feel the emotion of being in a classroom,
Yeah.
feel like what it's like to learn this life changing information from teachers. And so if you're going to be, if that's going to be the purpose of the video, to move people, right? Like, you have to get in there and figure out how you're going to tell the story to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And not to jump ahead, but like, there's one part at the end of the film, like at the end of the movie, when Zandra says, like, I can't even, oh, I get chills still. I don't know. It's like this one part that, like, and I'm saying that because we didn't tell her what to say, right? But we were really intentional with the question, I remember, that we asked her.
Yeah.
And so she talks about how she's like, you know what, people really like to think about how learning was lost during COVID, 2 years behind, and what
Yeah.
did we do? And but she said, but I don't think learning has been lost. And it was just the way that she said it was just this hopeful, just like celebratory, like, but we're working really freaking hard over here. And I don't think learning has been lost, because
Yeah.
that's what you can feel in her voice. She doesn't say it. And you can only emulate that with however we had worded the question to her, And I think that's why the time that was taken to do that was important. And I remember when you were explaining it to me, when we were coming up with these questions, I was like, okay, but so, like, what happens? Like, am I sitting there? Like, do we hear the question on the camera? And I
Yeah.
think,
Okay. I do
I
remember
remember,
that.
and I think you
Yeah.
were like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, is it like Oprah style? Like,
I
does the
do remember
question,
that.
I was
Yes,
like,
I
does
do
the
remember
question
that.
pop up on the screen? And
Yep.
you were like, no, we are going to sit in the back. Like, we sit behind the camera, right? And we just tell them the question, and we just record what they say. And it was like, even just that granular, I had no idea how it was going to work. I was like, cool, I made the questions, Damien, now what?
That's hilarious. I do remember that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's great. I do remember that. Yeah, shouts out to Zandra. That was great.
I know, so
She
good.
she killed it. She killed it. She's a natural in front of the camera. I feel like she's a natural in life. She just kills it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's
And
great.
she exudes passion for what she
Yeah.
does. She still works at Teach for America. I just saw her the
Mhm.
other day.
Yes.
And you can tell. So that's easy, right? When you're picking, like, okay, who am I going to interview? Who am I going to ask these questions, right? And the
Yeah.
diversity of the people we asked was important for the video too.
Right. Right.
So the diversity not only within the human of who it was, but an elementary school, a middle school, high school, a virtual learner, a virtual teacher, an alum. Leighton was actually, he was a director of operations for a school who used to be a teacher. So his impact was
Okay.
important because he
Hmm.
operationally had to get a school ready for COVID. So
Yeah,
I feel
and he
like
was
we
great as
had
well.
these, yeah. So it was also like the humans that we chose were diverse and very specific because we wanted to capture multiple, um, I guess,
Perspectives, maybe.
perspectives, yeah, scenarios.
Mhm.
So
So is creating video content online for your business a pain point? Does it take forever? You can't really tell if you're progressing. Are you beginning to feel the bottleneck? Well, if this is you, number one, know that you are not alone. Number two, what if I told you there was a templated way to streamline your video creation process without losing authenticity or quality of content and being able to connect with your audience and grow your following online without getting lost in social media? I've spent the last 12 years helping businesses, small and large, with this very same thing, and now I want to bring it to you with Video Blueprint, our in-person workshop right here in Cincinnati. We're talking immediate implementation, streamlined content creation, and everything targeted to your audience. Creating video content online does not have to be elusive nor unauthentic. So click the link below, let's remove the guesswork, and sign up for our in-person video workshop. I'll see you there. Quick recap. We talked about being able to uh, just get very clear on understanding what the goal and purpose is for the video. And so we did that a lot through virtual meetings, back and forth, really digging into the layers of TFA, especially in Jacksonville. And if I could go one layer even further as far as making it as black and white as possible, being able to ask you, like, so what exactly is the goal for this video? Like, what, when people watch this video, what do you want them to leave with? I know I tend to ask that question a lot when I start off with clients, because that's a perspective they don't really think of a lot of the times. A lot of the times they're on the front end like, I need this video. I
Right. I
need
need
this
it because it's
video.
a donor event and I need to show them a video. And it's like,
Yeah,
well, yeah, but like,
exactly. I need it to work. That's like, it needs to work and help what I'm trying to do. Like, that's what I need it
yeah,
for. And it's like, okay, that's a great start. So, so that's kind of how we start. And when we talk about figuring out what that goal is, what that purpose is, a lot of the times, when you hear that response, you can begin to kind of ask, figure out what are the problems to that goal. Like, if we're trying to showcase the resiliency for Teach for America Jacksonville, what are some of the problems that hindered that, or is the struggle for that? And that's where you have the COVID, where you have teachers in like classrooms trying to figure things out. You have trying to figure out the support system for them. You have the whole city shutting down. You have all these things. Okay, so we have all these problems. Okay, what are the solutions to those problems?
correct. Yeah.
Okay, we have the problem and we have the solution. Okay, who can specifically speak about each one of those problems? Okay, Leighton, he did his thing, like you're just saying, with the school system, and he does a lot with the I forgot the term he used for his position, but he helped a lot with getting uh the word PPEs keep coming to my mind, but
Oh,
getting,
like the glass, like, or not
yeah,
glass, the protective
yeah, all that stuff.
screens.
Yeah, he talked a lot about that. He talked about the teachers doing the virtual classes. Uh, with that video clip of her sounding out the words during the virtual
Yeah.
meeting. You have the actual teachers in classrooms. You have alumni. You have all these different perspectives that answers the problems to what we're trying to showcase. So now again, we're not guessing. I think that's the thing that I don't know, if I don't remember if I might have shared that a lot back then. I might have had that epiphany back then. I don't know. It's become more and more clear as I've continued,
Probably.
this being my 12th year now, is I don't have to guess when we're trying to create this content. I'm literally trying to hear what the actual goal is, what the actual purpose from your perspective right now, and then being able to dive into, okay, if this is the goal, what are some of the problems that hinder that from happening? And saying, okay, if those are the problems, what are the actual solutions? And let's not just ask the owner of the business. Let's ask the clients that they've served, that they've helped. We've done that for other projects, and it's turned out great because they're specifically targeting and answering the questions, bringing the solutions that the company provides to those problems. And so we just did that exact same thing for this project. Now, of course, every project looks different. And for this one, we had the opportunity to go from the pre-production and going through all of that into the production, right? And so for you, Allyson, we're talking about production. You mentioned it a little bit with the interviews. That's a great tidbit. I really forgot, like, you were trying to figure out that perspective. But were there any like hesitations, or like, I don't know if fears might be kind of a strong word, but anything that you were like, you mentioned the interview, so maybe that was one thing, but was there anything that you're going into it and you're like, man, I don't really know how this would work, or if it would work, or what my role is here? Or was there any kind of hesitation or fear, even if it was in the earlier phases? I'd love to hear what your perspective is or was on that kind of a thing.
I think when I think back on it, um, I mean, I think this is with any client. I mean, budget was 100%. You're always your first concern, right? So it's like, when you watch House Hunters and they're like, I'm a 5-bedroom house with 7, bathrooms, and I have a $2 budget because
True.
it's COVID and it's nonprofit, and I'm trying to create this $1 million video on not $1 million budget, right? So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how do you find that balance between we have to spend the money on this, but I can't have all the things, right? But so I think also the budget helped me stay focused
Yeah.
in a way that I was like, okay, because I was the one who asked for this, right? Like, it's not like someone in the organization came to me and they're like, we should do a video. It's like, I was actually like, I
Yeah.
need this video. It was that
Yeah.
I need this video because I need to be able to have it from a donor perspective. And I was almost proving to my team how valuable it was. I had worked with you before. I knew that the story was going to be impactful. So I feel like my fear was, you know, okay, we're spending this money to do a video. What if it doesn't succeed in the purpose of the video, right? So then it
Mm,
was like,
mm,
I knew it would, but it was like because I was the one sort of leading the charge on it, I was just like, I think I just felt a little bit more pressure to make sure that every single piece was intentional.
yeah.
So I think also because you weren't in Jacksonville and I knew you were traveling, so it was also, you know, that it wasn't a fear necessarily, but it was like, we got one day, right? Like we got like Damien's coming and we are cramming so much stuff. I almost cussed stuff into this one day. And I
Yeah.
actually think you did spend the night and we did one more school in the morning
Yes.
before you left. But like
Yeah. Yeah.
I was also like, what if Leighton is sick? Like, what if we spent this so much time picking the schools? Like, what if something happens in the school and we can't go that day? Because also we had to get so much clearance
Yeah.
to be able to bring a whole camera crew into a classroom. So I think
Right.
there were other nuances about the actual execution that day. You
Hmm.
know, we had to get media releases. So any of the kids that were on camera, even though they were wearing a mask, we still had to get approval to have them in the video. So I think there's other entities that were like, that I was more like, okay, cool, we're going to do the video. And then once I found out, I was like, all right, now the pressure is a little bit more pressure. But it wasn't, it wasn't, those are probably just the normal things that I would assume when you're
Yeah.
going to tackle a project like that, that I
Man,
remember being a little bit.
yeah. Yeah, that's a really good transparent perspective that I'll say I don't hear a lot and don't get to hear a lot. Because when you were sharing that, it almost felt like you were like, all right, I'm putting all my chips on the table here. We're gonna go for it. Here we go. Like I'm putting it all in. I got nothing else. We're gonna go for it. And to be able to work, from the wedding worked out great. And then from this, but now I'm in another state. And so you're having to speak with, different representatives and whatever entities in the organization yourself to try to, like, I don't want to say prove that this is helpful, but to kind of say, hey, this is really something that I believe can help and really showcase what we're trying to do. Kind of pitching that almost, and then turning around and saying, Damien, you got me, right? We're good, right? I'm like, yeah, we got you. And then it's like, I got you, but I'm still in another state, So I think that perspective it's new for me, and it's good to hear. It's just good to hear. I don't hear that a lot. I'm curious. Did you ever feel? Did you ever feel like it wasn't going to happen? Whether it was due to budget or whether it was due to maybe you just had a lot of pushback from the project, or maybe wanting it to go a different way. Did you ever have that feeling, or was it like once you kind of pitched it and was solid, kind of felt the momentum shifting from there?
I do remember there being hesitation,
Yeah.
right? Like I do remember, because again, every penny in a nonprofit at that time was tight.
Yeah.
So, and again, I value the work that you do. This is how much it costs. And it
Hmm.
was like, Allyson, do you want to get quotes? No, I do not. Right. And
Dream
again, not
dream
all clients
client.
are, right. But I'm saying
Dream
not all
client.
clients are going to be like that,
Yeah, true. Very
but
true.
for me, I was like, if you guys are going to, I'm putting a lot of time into this project, right? Like,
Hmm.
I think that it's going to, and it's still on the Teach for America website to this day.
I saw it, yeah, when I was researching for this. Yeah,
Yeah.
still on it.
So it's like, it's one of those where I was like, when it's gone, it's going to be gone. And you guys, and we didn't capture this thing that like so many people did the hard thing. They went to schools when it was very difficult, right? They
Yeah.
figured out how to, it was just one of those things that I was like, I think I believe in this project. And then, but my team, like, I remember they trusted me. They were like, all right. uh,
Yeah.
but I don't think I ever had any hesitation. It
Hmm.
was just a fact that that's kind of
Hmm.
how, and maybe clients, maybe it is a good perspective. Like clients are coming to you with, and it's their idea, right? So like I'm pitching it to my team. It's not like, hey, Allyson, we want to do a video. Can you get a couple quotes for us? It's
Right.
like, oh, hey, I think this is valuable for what I'm doing. And so I think that's why like the partnership that you and I had throughout the process was what I knew I needed. Like
Hmm.
this wasn't, like I said, I wasn't just paying a videographer to
Yeah.
take some video. It was like, no, I need someone to help me tell a story.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Man, amazing perspective. Thank you for sharing that. That's good. I think that helps me even in growing my own business and trying to reach honestly people like you that are in that position even more. So great. Thank you for that. Let's talk production a little bit. Like you were saying earlier, the schedule that you so eloquently put together and made adjustments and we're trying to figure it out. And
it
it
was
wasn't too,
tight.
yeah, it was tight. I was looking back at it. I'm seeing like the interview stuff here, interview time slots 1:30, then 3, 3:30, 4, 4:30, 5, 5:36. Like it's just boom, 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 nonstop. Yeah, but again, a lot of the work in putting that together. I remember, um, firstly, for clarity's sake, it was me. I brought on me and another guy to do all the filming there in Jacksonville. Um, and this guy I worked with him before. His name is Audie. Great work, amazing work, great guy to work with. He was on site for the wedding as well. So I wanted to bring him for this as well because Allyson, I think, had already like knew him, broke the ice. Like it wasn't like a brand new face familiar with him. And so we kind of divided and conquered a little bit because, like Allyson said, there are multiple schools. Like this wasn't just one school that we were filming. And the reason why was because different schools were doing different things. From the younger ones that I think Audie captured, where they they had like their
Yeah, they had
teachers
the
set up with the
plexiglass and the
yeah the class set
masks.
up. Hmm.
And they were very far apart. Like they had the
Yeah,
individual desks that were super spread apart versus
right.
the middle school, I think, was still actually in clusters. There was one
Yep.
school that was still, and then there was one that I mean, masks were required, but then let's be honest, plenty of the kids had, I mean, the
Yeah.
masks were like this, like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's about
you're just
right.
like,
That's
what
about
is
right.
happening? Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right.
So,
Yeah. Um, so we kind of divided and conquered, capturing different schools, getting supporting footage. And the supporting footage that we got was based off of the answers that we figured and thought and assumed that we would get from the questions that we were going to ask the people we were
mm,
interviewing. So once again, I'm not guessing. I know the questions that I asked. I have an idea of the answers they're going to say. So I want to get the supporting footage based off of that. So even though the schedule was full and packed, it was still a targeted plan to kind of get what we needed. And I think there were a few other deliverables as well that TFA wanted. Aside from this, that were kind of like long form recordings, and Audie handled those as well. Um, and so we did that, split it up, and then we met back at HQ for the interviews. And that's where all the interviews took place. Asked all the questions, got them all recorded. Worked out really smoothly. Great teachers were great in front of the camera. Sandra was great. Leighton was great. I mean, just all around solid content. Like I remember leaving that day, and I was like, "Yeah, we have solid content that we can use for the project." And I think that again goes back to being able to work through those questions. I also remember that by the end of the first day, your boy was tired. This
mhm.
was a solid. Like I'm looking at the schedule here. There were three schools. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at three. Up, wait,
Like, let me pull it up.
three
Yeah.
schools and the interviews
Yeah.
on that day. Yeah, and then the second day, like you're saying, was the two schools. And so, for you, logistics, production, scheduling, what was that like for you? And at that point, you already had kind of the schedule created, but now we're like, it's go time. We're going through it. What do you remember? What were you like? Oh man, this is crazy. Or what was it like for you?
Um, so it is kind of cheating because all the people we interview are teachers by nature, right? So
Mm-hmm.
also like their level of presentation skill
Yep.
or being able to speak is probably, you know, I wasn't
It's
concerned is my point. Believe me, ask a teacher a
yeah,
question, or, you know, it's everyone can
yeah,
speak.
yeah. It's definitely
Uh,
better. But I will say sometimes it's a little different when that camera and the lights get in
that's
front of
very
you.
true.
But they still did a great job. So they were fine. They were great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I definitely remember one of the classrooms we visited that day. And I remember walking in, and, you know, as kids do, right? There's a camera in the room, right? So there's some that are like, okay. And then some that are like, I'm ready for the camera. And remember, we were like, we're just videoing,
Yep.
just, just do whatever you're going to do. And because essentially, and maybe this is more part of the pre-planning, but I do
Mhm.
remember when we were talking in the beginning, you were like, you know, not to downplay the different schools, but B-roll is kind of B-roll.
Yeah.
Like I remember that we were like going to go to even I was trying to fit like one or two other schools, and I remember you being like, I think once we get a couple drone shots, and then oh, I remember you suggested we did purchase some footage because
Let's
remember
talk.
we were like, you know, we had a location in Tampa, we had another thing in Orlando. Like, we're obviously not going to go to Orlando. And
Yeah.
in the beginning, there's like this B roll of Orlando, but I remember that you were like, we have this library of assets that we can use.
Yeah.
So that also helped sort of hone in on, okay, what do we really need then? So I
Right.
remember not, I remember us probably not needing as many visits or as
Mhm.
much of that B-roll maybe that we got, because I think once I actually saw the video come together, I know the schools are different, but to the average person,
Right.
you kind of don't. So I mean, that was one thing, and then the second thing, I feel like once you set up all the interview equipment and we were in the room and you had the lights and like we were in that chair, like sitting in the tall chair, and I was just asking the questions, I remember like you could feel it almost. Like you could feel, I don't know, like the emotion or like the
Mhm.
pressure of the question. And remember at one point, Leighton had just started talking. And then I remember we interrupted him and I was like, do you want me to take your stuff? Like, and you can see in one of the clips, like he's still holding his like paper and
Yeah.
his phone in his hand and he's just like
Yeah.
sitting there. And I
Yeah.
remember being like, well, do you want to put any of that down? He was like, oh, I mean, yeah, just figured I'd start talking.
Natural. Natural. He's like, "What? Let's go. What do you need? Yeah, let's talk about it, man. I
Yeah,
get
it was so great. I remember literally coming home that day being exhausted and also being like, my heart is full.
it."
Like I remember just being
Wow.
like, this was cool. I usually don't get to go to classrooms, and because we had to get all this high level of approval, it was also refreshing because I was like, I haven't even been in a classroom,
Mm.
and it was really cool to see teachers, and I feel like, you know, we got to laugh with kids, and it was like the whole point. So I feel like when
Yeah.
I got home, I was just like, wow, that was really fun. I had so much
Wow.
fun, and maybe not everybody would feel that way, but that's how I felt. And I was like, now I felt like, here you go, Damien. Like I
Yeah.
got home
Yeah.
and I got
Yeah.
home and I was like, okay, we got the footage. I think we have great content. And then I was like, now it was like, what is he
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
gonna do?
point. Yeah. So I guess yeah. At that point,
Whereas you left and went home and you're probably like, all right, got a lot of work to do.
yeah, yeah. You get used to it. Like it's just it was a good bit. But and that's one of the things why one of the reasons why I enjoyed doing weddings so much was because weddings teach you to how to move in pressure. Like you're filming all day into the night, tons of footage. You have this story that you're trying to tell. At least for us, when we do our wedding videos, they're very story led. They're not some cookie cutter thing. They're very story led, and you got to create an amazing product, right? For this, I was like, man, we have a lot of content. We had so much footage, but I see the story. We have the questions. We ask the questions in the order of the way the story is gonna go. I like it. We were good. Like I knew we'd be able to make something out of it. But yeah, it is. You know, like oh man, how's he gonna do it? How's he gonna do it?
Right.
I mean, when I know, you'll know. Like that's that's about
Right.
it. But yeah, that's great to hear. But I'm sure that was a little bit like wondering what that's gonna look like. But I think it turned out pretty well.
It turned out great. Yeah. But then it's like, okay, it would be like 2 weeks, or I don't remember what the timeline was, but it would be like the next day. And I'd be like, so, no, I'm just kidding. I was like,
Yeah, I don't remember how long it took.
I
I
don't
don't think it
remember.
took that long. I don't think it was a long turnaround. Most times my turnaround's pretty quick if I can help it. Um, I just like to knock it
I
out.
remember we were already pushing the timeline. Not to go back to your other question, but that was the second thing that I wasn't
There
worried.
was an event. It was for an event, right?
It was for an event. So I remember
Yeah.
like we took so much time on the pre-planning, like way more than I had thought was going to
Mhm.
take. So I remember when we picked the day to actually film, then
Mhm.
I was like under the pressure. I was like, you know what I mean? Like, cause in the beginning I felt like, oh, we'll talk about this. And like you and I kept having these meetings. And then finally it was like, okay, but this event is coming up. So
Right.
I feel like that was the other thing of getting the approval for the school and getting this. It was pushing it a little bit. I remember,
Yeah.
but we made it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, man, editing is where the rubber meets the road because you have a plan, you figured out the goal, you got the questions down, you have the answers, you have the content, you have the B-roll, you have the music you're going to use for it, you have the way in which it's going to go in your mind, and then you put it together and you're like, "Oh, this isn't going exactly how I thought it was going to go." But the truth is that's normal. Like it never goes the exact way it's going to go. I mean, unless, high end, box office movie, of course. Like that's product like that's a different we're not talking about that. We're talking about businesses that are creating video content, video production businesses that's creating video content for other businesses or entities or nonprofits, whatever it is. And those projects never go exactly how you want it to go as far as editing. There's always something that has to be tweaked. Um, but yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember there was a little bit of a timeline because of the event that was coming up.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember.
but I also know that we did. I remember you guys were very great at responding to emails because we went through a few drafts, and it was like quick turnaround drafts. Like, send the email. Here's a first draft. I may either get a response the same day or I will the next day, kind of a thing. And it was quick, and it was like, hey, these clips, at these time, can you, I don't
The
know, switch it
editing.
with this
Yeah.
or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that worked out great, as well as the thing you mentioned at the end, with the whatever was the forecast for the future.
Oh,
Uh,
that we did add that I feel like at the last minute too,
yeah,
because we wanted the
yeah,
photos, but we didn't. But then it was like, well, what are we going to do over the photos?
right,
Um, I think it was something like that. But
yeah,
and and I remember a lot of those cuts. This might be a part of the process too, from a client perspective that I was not
mm,
expecting, but
okay,
I didn't know what B roll you were going to pick, right? So once I saw the first
right,
draft, I realized that there were like three kiddos that we didn't have waivers for. So like I had to go back and I looked at each
right,
individual face,
yep,
also trying to figure out what the masks on with the faces, right? And I had to
yep,
call the teachers because I would send them a screenshot and I'd say like, hey, here's the list of names we have waivers from. you know, is this where there's too many, it was like too many faces to the names. And so then
Yeah.
that was also tedious for me to just, because we had to have that. We had to have
Yeah.
their parental permission because they're kids.
Right.
And I remember we had to keep switching some of the cuts because there were a couple that we didn't get waivers for.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. That's what it was. So yeah,
So
it was a quick turnaround. We did have to make those adjustments, but at the end of it, if all I'm hearing is can we switch some B-roll clips out, like that's a win. Like it could have been
okay.
like, hey, yo, Damien, uh, this second half of the video, do you think do you think we could maybe not have this part? And I'm like, oh gosh, okay.
Oh yeah, I don't remember any of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So yeah, it was win, and I'm glad it worked out so well. And it's still serving well. It is on the website still. Um, it's doing pretty decent. On people are still watching it. Long story short, on the website and on the YouTube channel for Teach for America. So that's great to hear. Man, this has been great. So
I loved it.
don't. Yeah, yeah, me too, me too.
It
So we've
was a
gone through
really
the
fun project to be on. So
yeah,
like I said,
yeah,
when you called me and asked me, I was like, oh yeah. It was like a
yeah,
really nice memory that I have from, like I said, I'm not on staff there anymore, but it was definitely like a very fun memory that I have of a journey during a time that was just completely crazy.
yeah.
So
In summary, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the speaking of summary. That's that. So you have being able to get very clear on what the initial goal or purpose is for the video content that the client wants, and figuring that out, recognizing what are the solutions that may hinder that goal or that purpose from happening, being able to identify the solutions to those. In that way, you can create the questions that you need to have asked and answered. And then being able to have an amazing person on site to help with maneuvering the lanes of trying to figure out the people to get on camera, maybe the people that would be the best on camera. It is being able to find that is something that you need to be able to do. There's some people that are great when the camera's not around, and there are some people that are not great when the camera is around. So to have somebody that's there on the ground to be able to help with that is mint. Um, and then being able to create a plan of action, which Allyson helped with that so much. The logistics, the scheduling, a lot of back and forth between us and trying to figure out what's possible. A lot of back and forth between her and like the teachers and admin and trying to get permissions, as you just heard, for the different students. All these things. She really, man, she did so much in that side of it, and especially because I was out of town. So making that happen to the production, where Allyson was the person asking the questions. So having
Oprah. I was like, I'm Oprah. Here we go.
asking the question. So having that there was a big help, and she learned how interviews work, how
Yes,
it
I
works.
know. It was felt so silly. That was probably like the silliest question I felt like I asked you, but it was
Hard,
so true. I was
hard.
like, I don't know. How am I supposed to word it?
Yeah, no, you got it. You got it. You're by the end of it, you're a natural. It was you're in there. But going through product, that part of the project was great. So I can handle everything production wise, cameras, lighting, microphone, backup microphone, hard drive storage for the equipment, backup hard drive storage for the stuff we're filming. All that stuff was handled there on site, with me, then Audie at the other location, and then editing, being able to. I forgot to mention this one thing. When we were filming everything, as we're going through the days on my hard drive, I had those things organized. So I had, I believe I had them by like B-roll or supporting footage. I had it all there listed. All the interviews had them the folders named. We had two cameras on them, so cam A, cam B, had all of them listed. The audio, who the audio was for, the microphones that we had clipped onto them, who they were
Hmm.
for. Drone footage, separate folder. All those things were organized. So by the time I had I think I had a notepad or a folder at that time that I did my best to keep up with the interviews and when like great things were said or things that I think could be used. So when I go back to editing, I kind of have a starting point as to where, I want to draw from for the audio. So all those things helped the process a little bit better. Um, go,
And I think
well,
you being as involved in the pre-planning as you were is
yeah,
also an attributing factor to how well the story is told, right? Because you also were
okay,
with me along the whole pre-planning process. Like,
yeah,
I think that because you had taken so much time to understand the point that we were trying to make, I think that also maybe then throughout the day, you're kind of like seeing it play
mhm,
out
yeah,
maybe. And it's not like you're for the first time being like, oh, that's a cool question.
yeah.
You
I
were
didn't
like,
even
oh,
think about that. Yeah,
Allyson, I wrote that question for her. So
yeah, for
I
sure.
think that I'm assuming, has to play a
Yeah,
factor. But
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely like, yeah, to be there in the trenches, you get a feel for it, you get an understanding, you understand the thought process, and now you're not just going into it cold, like you've been warmed up, you know what's happening. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then the editing process, putting the vision to life. The editing, I mean, it's a couple years ago now, so I don't remember the length of time the editing process took. I could say it probably at least took about maybe, I don't know, 10 hours, 12 hours editing. I don't know. Probably longer.
yeah, probably.
But I'll say starting time was at least that. Actually, yeah, no, it was more than that because just syncing the footage was like 4 hours. And this might have been before I had certain software that helps me with that now. But and then being able to go through revisions with you and having the quick response time for that. I think this is why, you know, for all these reasons, is why I say working with you and Teach for America and Zandra and Leighton. And I mean, like, I say dream client for that reason. Like, it's not just, man, you guys are just the kindest people to work with. It was like these people really put their feet to the ground and said, hey, we're invested. Damien, you're invested. Let's do this together. And truthfully, sometimes it's rare. Sometimes it's tough to get that kind of both investment on both sides. So it's a breath of fresh air to be able to walk through that together. And even if maybe one of the schools weren't able to film, if something like that happened, we all would have figured out some kind of a
Yeah.
workaround. And I think that's the important part with, you know, talking about those things from the beginning, the investment. So if we all were fully invested into it, then we know that if we're going through this project together, we're going to put our best foot forward. And I think that's why I enjoyed walking through it with you. So thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
that is the Teach for America Jacksonville promotional video project. Thank you so much, Allyson, for taking the time, for talking with us. This is great.
Thank you for being great. If you need a great storyteller, you got one right here.
Oh man,
Uh,
thank you.
yep. It was really wonderful. I'm sure you'll show clips of the video. Roll the video for the people.
Roll the video. Yeah. I guess I might do that on YouTube or something if they want to see. But yeah, man, thank you so much. This was great. This is great. Thank you so much for
Yep.
tuning in, guys. I hope this helps. I hope this gives a little bit of insight on the possibility of production. It does take some investment at first, but it really brings and ups the quality if we're able to kind of put the people first and get through those hard questions first and getting that process going. If you notice, I didn't really talk about camera gear and all that stuff too much because there's so much of it out there. Use what you got, make the best of it. Nowadays you can use your phone if you have the right, storage hookup and everything. Create, go for it. Thank you again so much, Allyson, for taking the time, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.